Okay, guys, you're not too nervous, are you?
Well, yeah.
Well, we have a few more people that are signing in. Our employees get an hour of education credit. That's not the reason they come. They come to hear you all and hear the stories of our veteran forum once a quarter, but we do give them an hour of education credit, because if this isn't education for what the Veterans Affairs Department does, I don't know what is, relative to taking care of the great veterans of this nation. We want to welcome you to the VA North Texas Healthcare System Dallas facility, and thank you all very much for coming today. I'd like to start the program by introducing our director, Alan Harper, without whose support nothing happens, obviously, but he has been an overwhelming, enthusiastic, great supporter of this program. We thank you very much, Mr. Harper.
Thank you, Alan, and can't say enough nice things about Alan Clark and the amount of work he puts into organizing these programs. And just want to welcome all of our veterans that are here today, especially those with submarine experience, and we're looking forward to another history lesson. Each one of these has just been a wonderful history lesson, and you know, I'd much rather hear it than read about it. And we want to just say thanks to our panel members today for their presentations, and I want to thank all of our staff for being here. I think this moving into the afternoon has made a big difference, Alan. We get a lot of folks down, and we just appreciate it and look forward to hearing and learning more about the submarine service.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Thank you, Mr. Harper. I had my first correction by Navy Admiral today. I'm an old Army guy, and I said submariners, and he said that's too low, it's submariners. So I will never make that mistake again the rest of my life, Admiral Mendenhall. I thank you very much for that correction. I'd like to start the program with our Pledge of Allegiance, and Frank Havlick, who's one of our ardent volunteers, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and I want to express my appreciation to Frank for all the great work he did to get my panel together and to help me, and just, I really didn't have to do a whole lot once I got Frank on the program. So Frank, flag's up here on the stage, and if you'd lead us in the pledge, please.
Place your right hand on your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a lot of great stories to hear today, and a program that'll last 45 minutes to an hour. We do not do a whole lot of rehearsing. I just kind of talk to my panelists and kind of urge them on to give me some anecdotes and so forth, and then we just kind of go from there. So this is not as refined as Larry King, but I do take my coat off and wear suspenders to make it as lively as possible and as near to a Larry King live interview as we can. We don't go into a lot of history other than the individual history of the patrols, etc., for this program, but I did want to read you something that I read in an article which came out just recently, and was really about Commander Sam Dealey, who was killed in action on the Harder, and was one of the 7 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients from submarines in World War II. And there was an Admiral, Rear Admiral Chester Nimitz Jr. that said some things in this article in the Dallas Morning News, and he said he put the U.S. submarine operations in the Pacific in World War II in dramatic perspective. And this is kind of an overall perspective for you. And of course, we have the map here. It's not as big as we'd like it to be, but as our panelists pick out something that they want to show you, their patrol route, whatever the case may be, they have a pointer up here. And what I'd like to tell you about this area of history of World War II is that some 15,000 submariners with 288 submarines sank 2/3 of Japan's merchant fleet and 1/3 of its navy. And they did it with losses of only an approximate 1/5 of their people and submarines. A remarkably favorable comparison to the horrendous losses incurred by German World War II. I'll call them submariners also, who waged a similar campaign in the Atlantic. They lost 28,000 of the 41,000 men they sent to sea, a 68% casualty rate. So that gives you a sense of perspective of the people in this room, whom we will introduce, by the way, at the end of the program. And all the submariners from World War II at the end of the program, I'll tell you, and I want you to come up one by one, give us your name and the ships you served on and how many patrols you were on, and then just line up here. And our attendees have a chance to go up and shake your hand, kind of like a receiving line. And we want you all over here for a group picture after we're finished with the program. That gives you a little bit of the background here. And we will start with our individual speakers one by one, starting with Dick. If you just give them your name, how long you were in the Navy, the ship you were on, and how many war patrols you were on.
Dick Grissom. Is that working? I was in the Navy about 3 years. Served on only one boat, the USS Tyranny. Put it in commission under new construction, and that's about the time.
I'm Les Hewitt. My Navy days were fewer. My active duty days, I'd been in the Naval Reserve for a couple of months before the war started. I started out in national censorship, something that I'd been recruited for. I found out I could get into submarines, and that was my way of getting out of censorship. Although I'd had a fascination for them. I spent all of my time in the submarine force, except for relief crew periods, on the USS Pargo. I made 6 war patrols. I was in it at the end when the Pargo probably took the last depth charge of World War II and stayed until the boat got back to the States, and I ended my active duty period after 4 years and 3 months.
My name is Bill Coffey. I had the privilege of serving in the Yankee Navy for 30 years. I was born and raised down here in East Texas. And during the war, I served I made war patrols in 2 boats, the S-41, which was no less boat, that didn't even have a name, and the USS Starlet, the 392. I spent a total of 15 years in submarines and loved every minute of it.
I'd point out that Bill Coffey is the state commander of the organization, by the way. I'd like to start, and Bill, would you tell us a little bit about the volunteer aspect of your program in World War II?
Well, you know, we didn't have any draftees in submarines. You could volunteer in and you could volunteer out. That was all there was to it. If you said, I want off this boat, you were gone. I never served with a man that did that. I guess we had some, but I never did know anything about them. And there was a spirit like a large family. We could fight each other, but if anybody else came in and messed with us, we'd all fight them, no matter who it was.
Dick, do you or Leslie have anything to add to that aspect about the volunteerism?
Well, I'll add the fighting deal. When we came back to the States, we pulled into Washington, D.C. to get decorated, and 2 piers over was a tin can destroyer for the same purpose. And one night, our deck watch got drunk, and their deck watch got drunk, and they started shooting at each other. And they called out the Marines. Thank goodness they were drunk and couldn't hit anything red side of the green barn. But that was classic. That's classic of we stand together, but don't pick on them.
If that's what you Navy people did to each other, I can imagine what you tried to do to the Army, Marines, and Air
We
Force.
had to double up on them.
I have known at least one person in all of the years that I was on the Pargo, both years, I should have said, rather than all of the years, who asked off. And he asked off and because he frankly did not like depth charge. And he didn't think that he wanted any more of them than he had already had. And I will say this, that a lot of these people that Bill said could volunteer off sometimes had a mind to do that, especially after we had had an exceptionally bad time. They would figure that that was another thing. But at the time we were almost back in port and it was time to look at a transfer list, they were terrified. They were afraid they were going to be put off the boat, even though they had wanted off after a bad time.
Dick, I'd like you to tell us about the action when you were on your patrol at the Korean harbor, just south of the island action. That was very interesting. You wrote it to me, and I'd like you to tell that story, please.
Well, I'm a Johnny-come-lately to the submarine service. I'm younger than these other guys because I don't have one of these vests, don't you see? So that's why I'm in mufti and they're in their uniform. But I had the distinct honor of serving with one of the distinguished skippers in World War II, George L. Street, the third, I might add. And he was one of 7 recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor, and one of, I believe, 4 were posthumous and only 3 were living. Correct me if I'm wrong, Admiral. But along at the end of the war, targets were hard to find. They were non-existent. We had decimated both the military Navy and the merchant fleet to the point there was not many targets worthwhile. So we had to search them out, and the skipper devised the scheme of entering harbors day and night. We'd go in and surface at night and submerged in the daytime if the water was deep enough where we could get out and get concealed. South of Korea, there's a little island called Kelport Island. And Commander Submarine Pacific sent us an ultra and said there was a convoy anchored there in an anchorage. And this anchorage will describe it as being a horseshoe shape, and on the open end of the horseshoe is about 2 miles across, large area. So we changed locations, and it took us till about 9 p.m. in the evening to get to the location of this anchorage. And we started in and discovered that there were 2 escort vessels outside protecting, going back and forth across this open area. And as they would be up here, we'd try to come in on the other end. And it was a natural show all the way across. It would beat anything I've ever heard of. They didn't need these escorts. It was very well protected. And it took us until 1:30 in the morning to finally figure out the way into that harbor. And of course we knew that there was something vital in there because they had 2 escorts patrolling the outside, and at that time they didn't have 2 escorts to spare. We penetrated the harbor and we moved in, and it was a dark night. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And there was radar stations. The island was well protected. They had 5 radar stations. So the interference from the mountains fouled up our radar. So the old man decided he'd fire a torpedo for effect. So he let one go, and it ran 7,000 yards and exploded on the beach. And when it exploded, it illuminated the whole area to give us enough light to where we could see the targets. There was one huge vessel dead ahead of us and 2 smaller ones out to the side. The huge vessel was a 10,000-ton gasoline tanker, fully loaded. And the 2 escorts on the side were brand new, frigate class. They would be the equivalent of our destroyer escort, if you're familiar with that vessel. So the skipper fires 3. The fact that the first shot ran all the way to the beach meant there were no nets protecting these things. So it is open season at this time. Now, mind you, as we penetrated the harbor, we're well inside the 10-fathom curve, 10 fathoms, 60 feet. And that's not enough for a submarine to dive in. By the time we got to where we could pick up the targets, we were at 45 feet of water. That's shallow. So he fires 3 fish at the tanker and struck it amidships, right in the center of the target, and that son of a gun went 2,000 feet in the air, just right straight up, a sheet of flame. It's unbelievable what it looked like. And you could stand on the deck and read the newspaper easy enough, and we were 1.5 miles away from the target. So now it's time to get the heck out of Dodge, you know, because these two birds are out here and these two birds are over here, so we got to hurry. And what are you going to do in 40 feet of water? You know what a 3-point turnaround in the middle of the street is when you drive in your car? You pull up, you back up, you pull up, you back up, and you get the heck out. Well, that's what we had to do. So as we were leaving the scene, skipper said, wait a minute, shut it down. We got to get these other two birds. So we had one fish in the two fish in the after room, and everything was going in the forward room. So we fired one fish at each of the targets. Thank goodness they were still, so there was no angle on the bow to contend with. Got both of those guys. They went up bloom. So here we go. Now we got to clear out. Fellas outside are excited. They probably, as best we can determine, they were either scared of us and we were scared of them, and both of us were glad of it. But as we proceeded out, they proceeded in. At this point in time, we had gone to battle station surface, manned our deck guns, which consisted of one 5-inch 25, two 40mm mounts, one twin 20mm mount, and 6 50 caliber machine guns. And we go within about 100 yards of each other, and not a shot was fired, and ran like hell, if you'll pardon the crude expression, to deep water, and never got one single depth charge. Couldn't believe it. Now there's an airfield very close to us. We could have been bombed. So we get out, completely out of the area, and the next day you could hear all sorts of depth charges. The sky was full of airplanes. We couldn't surface in the daylight at all. They were a little upset with us for some strange reason. And it got a little rough for a couple of submarines that were in the vicinity that didn't know what had happened. But that was a pretty slick deal, and that was on our first war patrol, incidentally. And we had good hunting that patrol by going into these various harbors, and always had good luck. And once in a while we'd get a depth charge attack, but that wasn't too bad for the price they had to pay. That's about the size of it.
Leslie, I'd like you to tell us about the incident at the Saigon River, the below test depth, one of your patrols, at the Saigon River, I guess Vietnam. You went below test depth of whatever it was.
I'm not going to be able to top the sea story told by Dick here, but an unusual experience that the Pargo had was off Indochina, in fact, near the entrance to the Saigon River. Pargo relieved the submarine Kraken that had had a dry run. And the first night on station, we picked up what we thought at the time was a destroyer with at least 2 and possibly 3 other anti-submarine vessels. It was a bright moonlit night. Visibility was exceptionally good. The captain put out a radio message to other submarines that might be in the area, giving them the track of the convoy, and so maybe we could get a little help down the line. But we started the approach in the moonlight, using radar, and my recollection is, as we got close to the firing point, the captain sent everyone below and remained on the bridge himself, and we just kind of almost submerged. He was about the only thing up there, and fired. We fired all 6 tubes from the forward torpedo room, and then turned and fired yet another one from the after room. But he observed a hit only on the main target, the largest in the group. We immediately started south and thought that we had a great deal of water under us, or certainly more than we found out that we had. But as we started down and were ready to level off at 300 feet, we were having difficulty maintaining that depth. And we kept slipping down. Mind you, the submarine is designed to go to 300 feet. But we kept going down, and the captain did not want to use the pumps there to maintain depth control any better. And until we suddenly hit the bottom, and in the process wrecked our two sound heads that weren't rigged back in. And then we took some light depth charges, but while settled on the bottom there, something a submarine does not like to do. I think a lot of people that know little of submarines don't realize that a submarine wants to keep moving, twisting, turning to try to get out from under the depth charges. Well, in this instance, the depth charging didn't amount to a great deal, but we then had the most unusual experience of being moved around on the bottom by the current. It's pretty hard to describe the eerie feeling of being locked up in something that some people might refer to as sort of a sewer pipe thing, where the noises are all amplified, and being dragged over this coral or lava bottom. It was screeching, groaning, crunching noises, any kind of a noise that you can imagine. It seemed to me like they might have been devised in another planet, I don't know. But it was very scary, and personally, I wondered whether we might fall off of a ledge or something like that and go still deeper. But this went on, and it turned out to be the longest dive that the Pargo had. We were down for approximately 12 hours. All of this was about to come to an end. Naturally, when you're on a dive that long, the air gets pretty bad. And what you do is you turn into your bunk. Anybody that wasn't had to be up was trying to sleep it off or just be quiet. And I was in my bunk, and I remember waking just slightly, it seemed like, and all of a sudden I heard what I thought was screw noise. I was a sonar operator, and some things like that register to you. And I was heard, my God, here they're coming back. And until I realized that the noise I was hearing was window bar gates, usually known as muley gates, was snoring very loudly in the bunk across the aisle from me there. And it wasn't long after that the captain decided that we would see if we could get back up, and blew the safety tank, as it was, and up we came. But we were, as a result of hitting the bottom there, we were incapacitated there to continue the patrol in the usual way. And that had some other ramifications to it down the line there. We took on another boat's assignment that didn't involve the need for the sound gear. But being dragged across the bottom was a pretty terrifying experience.
Thank you, Leslie. William, would you tell us about the story about the ship that was sunk and its bow was sticking up? I'd like to hear you tell that story, please. And, tell us, possibly show us on the map approximately where that incident happened with a little pointer.
I don't know if I can see that far enough, but I'll try. This was around Lot's Wife and between Iwo Jima and the mainland. Am I in the right place up there?
That's Japan.
Okay, that's Japan, right in there. We had a captain that liked to use a deck gun if the target wasn't too large, and so we'd save torpedoes. And the idea was to get them between you and the moon track or you and the sunset and surface and close as be as ready as you could possibly be before you open fire. And we had a 5-inch 25 and a single 20 forward and a twin 20 aft on the cigarette deck. And we didn't mount our 50s for that operation because we never did get close enough. Well, we mounted them later, but not in this particular time. So we surfaced on this jewel and closed on him and opened fire. And we had a torpedoman from Seattle named Bobby Mays on that single 20 forward. And he would concentrate on the gun crews, on whatever it was we were working on. And he could clear a deck real quick with that thing. And so we hit her several times, and she was going down by the stern. And we had a round in the gun, and the old ship was just sitting there with her bow up in the air. So Captain was on the bridge. We asked him for permission to fire one more, and he said, have at it. So we put one right through the bow, and it was just like the movies. That thing just sunk, just pretty as could be. Benedict.
Dick, tell us the story about the Japanese prisoner that you captured and took on board.
I got some friends in the audience, they've heard this, so bear with me. We, operating in the Yellow Sea, in this general area, all of our activity was confined to this area in here, around Korea and up at Port Arthur, Manchuria, and over to Hokkaido. Couldn't get into the Sea of Japan. This is just a side comment, folks. Don't mean a whole lot. This was mined heavily across here, and the submarine could not penetrate that at all. Now, we're in open waters, and Lookout spotted an object in the water, and we closed. Found out it was an observation scout airplane owned by the Japanese Air Force, and has pontoons on the wings and main body, and it was dead in the water. And as we eased up to it, we were going to throw grappling hooks over and tie up to it. Found out there were 3 crewmen on this thing, and they were on the pontoons and very agitated that we seemed to be closing on them. The pilot had an object behind him. We couldn't see exactly what it was. Thought it was a hand grenade, and it was shaped just like a German potato masher hand grenade. And he threw that up on the deck, and we all took cover and didn't do anything but smoke. So the gunner's mate kicked it over the side, and we couldn't tie up for some reason or other, and made motions for them to come aboard, and needless to say, 2 of them swam off in the opposite direction and took a big swallow of salt water, and one of them bonsai, and away he went, and that was the end of him. The other one didn't like the salt water, so he came up spluttering, and one of the guys jumped in and swam over to him and pulled him back aboard ship. And the third one was the pilot. Now, this pilot was a graduate of UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles branch, and spoke better English than anybody but the skipper and the XO. He was a really smart cookie, but he was ornery as the devil. And we billeted him in the after torpedo room, which happened to be where I bunked. And we had to prepare the room, get everything, anything of danger, knives, guns, whatever, out of the way. That took us a while because we didn't even know what we had ourselves. And every now and then somebody would find one under a mattress or just laying down somewhere. And that's all he would have needed. Well, he was a real bother. He tried to sabotage a lot of equipment, do this, that, and the other. And he was obstinate. He wouldn't clean up his area. So finally, well, let me interject another little story in there. We had a mean torpedoman by the name of Hemphill. And Hemphill hated that Jap with a passion. So one night there's just Hemphill and the Jap, and everybody else is asleep. So Hemphill pulls his knife out, scoots it across the floor and says, pick it up. And the guy, of course, just looked at him. He wasn't any dummy. And it got bad. He's got to hollering at him, pick it up. And by now, Hemphill's got his 45 out. And Wallace, the first class in charge of the afternoon, is awake. He jumps out of the bunk, comes over and grabs Hemphill. What's the matter with you? You lost your mind? He said, I'm going to kill that Jap. No, you're not. So that settled that. Well, several things similar to this had taken place, and Wallace had his fill of the Jap. And he was really giving us a hard time. So Wallace said, called the two torpedoes who worked with him, said, open that torpedo tube. We had one tube, didn't have a fish in it. They opened it. He says, ram that guy in there. I'm tired of fooling with him. We're going to shoot him out to sea. So Leach and Hemphill, and I'll never forget the expression on that Jap's face, picked him up, and he's fighting and screaming, shoved him in the torpedo tube, slammed the door. Now for you folks that are not submariners, a torpedo tube is 21 inches inside diameter, so it's considerably larger than that outside. And when he got him in and got his feet clear, they slammed that torpedo tube door, and I can imagine what the racket was inside, much less how dark it was. So for effect, Wallace said, shoot a little high pressure air in there to make it realistic. And they gave him a blast or two of air, and he wasn't in there but 3 or 4 minutes. So Wallace said, take him out. So the boys opened the door, and it took 2 of them to pull him out as well as to put him in. And when they stood him on the floor, he wouldn't stand. He just wilted like an ice cube and went right on down to the floor. We didn't have much trouble after that.
Leslie, we were talking about, you're maybe describing the scariest time you had out there on a patrol.
I think you said serious.
Scariest.
Okay. Every time you get around a Pargo sailor who made the 6th War Patrol, we always have to remember November the 26th, 1944, as one of our bad days. We'd had some bad luck on this patrol up in Palawan Passage. Made some approaches that produced nothing. I think on one instance we darn near left the captain on the bridge when we were ready to dive. Most embarrassing thing. But we moved on down off the coast of Borneo, Brunei Bay. I'm not sure that I pronounced Brunei correct. We call it Brunei one way or the other. And Shorty Nolan, the lookout, had picked up smoke on the horizon, and what developed was a convoy consisting of only one tanker with 2 circus escorts and Betty, patrol bomber overhead. The captain was determined that we were going to get this tanker, and sure enough, everything fell into place. That we, at the time, we should have fired the tanker, or were planning to fire. We were so close that the captain realized that the torpedoes were not even armed before they hit the tanker. So we had to turn and open out and use the stern tubes. When we fired all 4 tubes, the first torpedo had already hit the target before the last fish left the afternoon. And the noise of it, we were so close, shattered gauges on the torpedo tube. What happened after that, we were in fairly shallow water, about 160 feet, and had only one way to go. There was a reef in one direction, of course, Borneo in one, and a minefield, a known minefield in the other direction. So we were trying to get back out to sea. The initial depth charging was fairly light. And after a lot of twisting and turning during a period of approximately an hour, maybe a little less than an hour, things had been quiet for a good while. We couldn't hear anything. And the captain went to periscope depth and took a look. What he found was that we had circled around in some manner in all of these evasive tactics and were back at the scene of the attack. What he saw was one half of the tanker. The after end of the tanker had already sunk. And out on, further out, he could see a frigate, the main Japanese escort. I don't think he looked overhead, or if he did, he missed the airplane. But in any event, the spectacle was something that he wanted to capture on film. And there is, in this submarine book, History of U.S. Submarines of World War II, a photograph of the Yoho Maru, or what was left of it. That photograph, I have to say, it almost cost us the ship. He got, in addition to getting a photo of the tanker, what's left of it, he also got a photo of the frigate, supposed to have been one of Japan's newest ones, because it was also photographed, not anything most of us have, but it was photographed for the Naval Intelligence magazine, a publication that came out, and it pictured this as one of Japan's newest. What happened while we were taking the picture is that the aircraft that we had previously seen spotted us and dropped 3 aerial bombs very close aboard. We immediately went south, and of course we were running about 10 feet off of the bottom, I think, and took one string of 11 depth charges, because the frigate was coached back in by the splash of the bombs. We took 11 of them that were fairly close, and then a little bit later, within minutes later, was the second string. There were 13 depth charges right down the port side. I was in the conning tower at my usual battle station. All the gauges on the port side had glass covers on them, and it seemed like all of that glass hit me. And we also had someone report that a telephone rack on the port side was knocked off of its rack and extended the length of the cord across the crew's dinette. I wasn't able to confirm that, but that's what the guy said. It was a very terrifying experience. The captain described it in a patrol report. It was as though someone was standing on the running board of an automobile, jumping up and down on it and making the car go sideways. A lot of people here won't remember cars with running boards, but I don't think you would. But anyway, it was a pretty bad experience. I can remember ducking when that second string went off. I don't know what I was shielding myself from, but I had my head down on a little table there in the conning tower, and I was going to protect myself from these depth charges. But I will say that in submarines, you learn to pray a lot. In this instance, my concern was not getting the hell out of there, but usually it was the main prayer that we uttered. But I was thinking more about the folks, because I didn't think that we had a prayer of getting out of that. I knew that my days were up.
We're glad you did get back from that one, Leslie. William, I'd like you to tell us the story about the incident near Iwo Jima and you picking up the prisoners, I believe.
Just before the Marines landed on Iwo Jima, Thank you. Okay. That was our patrol area, and so we got a transport right off Iwo Jima. And the Japanese soldiers' pack was built in such a way that it was a life jacket. If he got off that ship, he'd float, and the island was right there, and we knew they'd get ashore. Anyhow, we surfaced, and the captain wanted somebody to take back to Midway for the Navy intelligence to talk to. And the captain's from Alabama. And man, he was pure Alabama too. He had it in his drawl. He was an old submarine veteran. He's Naval Academy class of 35. And so I was up forward of the bridge with a line, with a boat hook on it, a small hook, trying to get one of these guys to come aboard. And the old man was up on the bridge with a microphone, and he hollered out, "Hey, you SOBs, don't you want to be saved?" And we finally got one to come aboard, and he was the chief engineer off this transport. He was a Korean. His name was Cmdr. And he was just the opposite of the one that Dick was talking about. The old man told us, if he even blinks his eyes, well, just shoot him. He slept in the after room, and we made him clean the head, toilets, and bring him up to the mess hall and clean the runners and any dirty work that you could make him do. But he was very happy to do it. And he liked black-eyed peas and fresh frozen strawberries. That was his favorite food. And when we finally went back to Midway, well, here come half a dozen Marines heavily armed to get this little guy. And he wasn't 5 foot tall, you know. And he didn't want to go. He wanted to stay with us. But he did anything we wanted him to do, and he did it gladly. We watched him all the time, but we just didn't have any trouble with him.
You'd mentioned, Leslie, going back to you there, you surfaced one time, and some special story you told about surfacing. You thought it was a target, but what it ended up being, it was
Okay. I think we were homeward bound off of which patrol, I can't remember, but somewhere in the South China Sea. Every submariner here knows that you're not much of a match for an airplane with bombs, and so if you sight an aircraft, you don't waste a lot of time trying to identify the thing, you dive. That's what happened here when one of the lookouts spotted an airplane. We went down quickly. But once under it, there came to be some doubt about what he had actually seen. And after the captain talked to the lookout and everything, there was a little skepticism about what it was. So we went back to periscope depth and stuck the scope up, and lo and behold, you could still see this object up there in the sky. The captain looked at it for a time, and then the quartermaster, who had been on the bridge at the time this thing was sighted, was asked to look through the scope there and see if he could see what this thing was. And he reported back and says, "Captain, I think that's one of those dirigibles." But anyway, this again is Muley Gates. But the captain was, I guess, was still a little skeptical, and so he took over the scope there and looked. And about that time, this albatross, or whatever the heck it was, flapped its wings, and we found that we had dived for a seabird. But it shows how jumpy you get. But one of the slogans that the captain always enunciated when we began a war patrol, that was that eternal vigilance is the price of safety. And this was another case of extra vigilance.
Thank you, Leslie. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience. If you'd like to come up, we'd like to have you come up to this mic up here. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask any of our participants. Anybody in the audience want to go up and ask anything? Yes, come on up, John. Come up to the mic. We need to hear your question so everybody can hear it. This is an Army guy from the Battle of the Bulge asking this question.
My only experience going over was on the old Queen Mary and coming back on the old Queen. Going over it was like glass, and coming back was a 3-day Atlantic storm, and 90% were seasick. Did you ever get seasick under the water? Is that an idiot question?
Under the water?
Yeah, not on, sir.
Oh no, John. No, it's just like we are here. Unless you're in a hurricane or a typhoon, and it can go to considerable depth. You can feel wave action 100 to 200 feet down. It depends on how severe it is. But submerged, normally submerged, is quiet and peaceful, and nobody's bothering you. Yeah. Let me describe a depth charge. I've listened here to these fellas, and to me, country boy, a depth charge, first time I was under a depth charge attack, it scared the liver out of me, and I, like you, I said what I thought was my last prayer. This was a 10-hour depth charge attack. And if you would imagine getting yourself in a 55-gallon drum and putting a lid on it and get 2 guys on either side of it with 10-pound sledgehammers and beat the devil out of it, that's a depth charge attack, right? Right?
Do you have anything else to say about the seasickness, either one of you?
Well, I have a couple of seasick stories. I had replaced a yeoman that they thought had chronic seasickness. So naturally, I didn't want to be sick ever. But I can remember on one occasion, we were preparing to go on. I'm off? We were going through the training operations off in the Indian Ocean there, off Fremantle. And people who have been in the Indian Ocean know that that is one rough son of a gun when it's rough. Anyway, the training exercises were exhausting after a time. All of us have been through this, and you usually have a destroyer out there. I think it was a Chester, I'm not sure. But anyway, you run target for them for a time, and then they do it for you. You go to battle stations, you secure from battle stations. But on this occasion, the forward torpedo room reported that they were manned and ready, except for Wiener. Well, Wiener was a new recruit on board. And the captain said, "What's the matter with him?" And he said, well, he's in his bunk. And then they said, "What's the matter? Well, he's seasick." And the captain himself said, "Tell Wiener to get to his battle station. We're all sick." I felt when the captain admitted that he too was sick, I had permission to be sick. On yet another occasion, we're talking about whether it's bad submerged as it is on the surface. That question's already been answered, but I can recall some rough water that we went through. And again, I'm sure a lot of us were having some pretty bad problems, and the captain stepped out of his stateroom into the control room and says, "Tell Mr. So-and-so, whoever had the bridge, to dive the boat, let's get some rest." So on this occasion, we just submerged the boat, just so we could straighten out a little bit and feel good again.
Do you have anything you want to add, Bill, on that question?
When I went on submarines, I had 4 years on the old battleship Oklahoma, and I thought I had pretty good sea legs. And I was out in the Philippines, and we got run out of there. We were the RAF, the Retreating Asiatic Fleet. And so we got down to Fremantle, and that's where I went on submarines in February '42. And we went around the Great Australian Bight, the bottom of Australia, up to Grissom, and start running up through the Solomons. And believe you me, I got sick. I didn't think I was a ship's cook. And if you've ever seen a ship's cook with a bucket in his hand trying to get something done, well, I was there, I'll guarantee you. And, but in '44, when they had that big typhoon off Okinawa when those destroyers run out of fuel and capsize. We had to go to over 400 foot before we had level, before we got out of it. That's how rough it was.
We're not going to have time for any more questions. We had very extensive answers, as you can tell, and very detailed answers, and very interesting answers that added a lot to our understanding about what these men went through in their wartime exploits. I want to thank the people on our program, on our staff here, the medical media people, Penny Kirby in the office, and the EMS and engineering people, and everybody else. I can't always remember toward the end of the program here who all helped us with everything, but it takes a lot of people to put these programs on, as you can imagine. Be sure that all the employees sign up for their education credit. I would like to remind you all what the United States submarine veterans of World War II are organized to accomplish, and that is to perpetuate the memory of those shipmates who gave their lives in submarine warfare, to further promote and keep alive the spirit and unity that existed among United States Navy submarine crewmen during World War II, to promote sociability, general welfare, and good fellowship among its members, and pledge loyalty and patriotism to the United States government. And as I have said on these programs before, those of us that survived our wars, and these men are representatives of that, none of us really consider ourselves heroes. We may have our decorations, whatever the case may be, but always in our memory, we remember those who didn't come back. And I'm just one of those guys. I remember those who didn't come back. U.S. Navy submarines paid heavily for their success in World War II. A total of 374 officers and 3,131 men are on board 52 U.S. submarines. These are the survivors. We want to thank the submariners that came here today to be with us. We want to thank you very much for being here. I'd like to have a round of applause because some of our employees will have to leave. Thank you very much. Frank, I don't know where you are, but would you all start collecting up here, starting over here with each one of you. There you are. And each one of you take this mic, and one by one, just give us your name and your ship, and then anyone that has an opportunity and can still stay a few more minutes, because we're almost at the 1 hour level, come and shake their hands, okay? Get on this side of the big column there. Let's start with you, sir. You start right here. Just give us your name. Just face the audience. Give us your name and your ship and your number of patrols, and start this way, right here. Next, right here. You're fine, sir. Give us your name, patrols and ship. Eddie, you're next. Come on back around here and line up this direction. Line up right here. Okay, go ahead, sir. Please get started.
My name is Ivan Nicodemus. I was in the USS Sea Dog, SS 401. I only made the last patrol because I was not drafted until 1943. The war was half over by then. And
thank you, sir. Gentlemen, we want to introduce you all. So all I can have time for is your name and your number of patrols and your ship. You know, ships, whatever.
Eddie Griffith, USS Sea Dog, all 4 patrols. Started on our 5th when the war was over.
Joe Ballou, the S-30, and I'm too young to make those patrols.
Eddie, don't leave. Eddie.
I'm the baby, huh?
Wiley Davis, and I was on the USS Batfish, and I made 7 patrols.
Paul Lamar, USS Segundo, made 4 patrols.
Corwin Mendenhall, I made 7 more patrols on the Sculpin and 4 patrols on the Pintado, and I commanded the Catfish after the war was over.
I would point out that the Admiral has 3 silver stars minimum, if I count them right, and that's the 3rd highest decoration for gallantry in action. Right here. Yeah.
My name is Walt Eller, and I served on the USS Sea Devil. I went in right after the war, so I didn't make any war patrols.
My name is Glenn Baker. I made 5 war patrols on the USS Rock.
My name is Haskell Walker. I made 5 war patrols on the USS Rasher.
I'm Dale Hockett, and I made 4 war patrols on the USS Timber.
My name is Joe Allen. I was on the USS Silverside. I was in the Navy 10 years, 1 month, and I made 4 war patrols.
My name is W.H. Goodman Jr., nickname is Benny. Don't know how I got that. But I've made 3 war patrols in Battle of Midway on the USS Grissom.
My name is Gene Eisinger. I made 2 war patrols on the USS Macabre.
I'm the kid on the block. I was there after all these pops went home. I was on the USS Pargo 331.
Would you 3 guests please stand? Audience, would you give our submariners Thank you very much, gentlemen. We're proud of your service to your country. We're very happy that you came to visit us today and tell us your stories and be our guests at the VA Medical Center. We'd like for you all to get back over there, and our photographer, Jean, your right here, you tell us where you want us, how you want it, maybe on the stage or whatever. She's in charge for a couple of minutes here.